The courtroom had been silent for less than 10 seconds when the royal family's carefully protected image began to fracture. A sealed evidence box was placed before the judge, its contents logged under the private cipher of Queen Elizabeth II. Then came the sentence no one inside the palace had prepared to hear. Prince Harry had secretly removed the late monarch's hidden diary from Windsor and concealed it for more than 2 years. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles tightened his fingers around his spectacles as the High Court confirmed the chain of events. The High Court, England's senior court for civil disputes, had traced the diary from a Windsor archive to a residence controlled by Harry's legal representative. The king never turned toward his son. He stared ahead, knowing the volume held judgments about his reign, his marriage, and the crown's future. William reacted with colder restraint. The prince placed his pen flat on the table and asked, how long did he know the family was searching for it? Palace archivists had spent months believing the diary was destroyed during the transfer of Elizabeth's possessions. An archive is a protected collection of important records, and Harry had watched its officers search while knowing their assumption was false. The diary was no ordinary journal. Elizabeth had written about Charles, William, Camilla, Harry, and decisions she believed should remain sealed until a designated royal review. That meant a controlled examination by approved relatives and advisors before private material could be opened. One disclosure could deepen old wounds. One hidden sentence could change how each royal understood the Queen's final wishes. Then the clerk read a documented account of the note found inside the cover. Elizabeth's handwriting warned that her words must never become a weapon between her descendants. Camilla stiffened when her name appeared in the index, while Harry lowered his head as fears grew that selected passages had been copied. He said nothing, and the silence made suspicion heavier. The judge ordered the evidence box opened. Charles finally looked across the aisle, and Harry met his father's eyes for 1 second before looking down again. No accusation followed. None was needed. The court had proved what he concealed, but not why he risked his place within the family to protect it. And as the palace struggled to absorb the betrayal, attention shifted from the hidden diary to the 3 men now trapped by it. One grieving son, one furious heir, and one father forced to wonder whether his mother's last secrets had been kept from him deliberately. The diary had become evidence, but inside the royal family, it was something far more dangerous. For Charles, it carried the final unguarded voice of his mother. For William, it represented another breach of trust by the brother he once protected. And for Harry, it was bound to a private promise he believed no court, crown, or family council had the moral right to break. Charles felt the wound before he understood the legal danger. Elizabeth's diary was not simply a record of private thoughts. It was the last place where the Queen had spoken without ceremony, advisors, or duty shaping every word. A constitutional archive is a protected collection, preserving royal records for review, and William believed the volume belonged there. The prince saw concealment as a threat because hidden records could distort succession, damage trust, and weaken the rules he would inherit. Harry refused that judgment. Through a documented statement read by his lawyer, he insisted he had taken nothing for profit, revenge, or spectacle. He claimed Elizabeth had personally asked him to shield certain pages from relatives who might read pain as accusation. The younger son believed he was keeping faith with her, yet every hour he remained silent made that promise look like possession. Camilla carried fear. Several court filings referred to a section titled "The Consort Question," and the Queen Consort understood what that phrase could mean. A consort is the spouse of a reigning monarch, holding status beside the sovereign without possessing the crown's authority. After the hearing, she sat alone, removed one glove, and asked an aide whether Charles had seen the index. When the answer was no, she stared at the closed door and asked again. Then Harry's lawyer disclosed the unsettling detail through the sealed court inventory. Inside the diary was a message addressed only to "my spare grandson." The wording suggested Elizabeth had given him a role no one else understood. William's anger sharpened when security logs showed his brother entered the Windsor archive the night before the Queen's papers were catalogued. Cataloging meant recording, identifying, and securing each document. This was no sudden act of grief. It had been planned. Charles finally approached Harry inside a private courthouse room with no advisors present. He tried to speak, stopped, then asked, "Did she tell you not to trust me?" Harry looked at his father but could not answer. That silence carried more pain than denial. The betrayal had not begun in the courtroom, nor in the archive after midnight. It began during one final gathering at Windsor, when the Queen summoned Harry alone and gave him a warning no one else was permitted to hear. Months before the palace noticed anything missing, Elizabeth had already begun preparing for the battle her diary might cause. During a private family remembrance ceremony at Windsor, she watched Charles and William leave the chapel with senior aides. Then she asked Harry to remain behind. The doors closed, the candles burned low, and the late Queen made a request that would later place her grandson before a judge and against his own family. Elizabeth had written private journals for decades, separating ceremonial records from thoughts she never intended for public eyes. A ceremonial record is an official account of royal duties and events, while her personal pages carried family tension, constitutional fear, and the private cost of wearing the crown. She knew one sentence, removed from its setting, could wound Charles, divide William from Harry, or turn grief into permanent suspicion. The Queen felt that danger most sharply during her final year. She had watched private pain become public argument, and she feared her words might be reduced to weapons after her death. Following the Windsor Remembrance Service, a ceremony honoring departed members of the family, she summoned Harry into the small library beside St. George's Chapel. There, she placed a brass archive key inside a white handkerchief and pushed it toward him. Harry stared at the key but did not touch it at first. Elizabeth told him he understood what it meant to feel judged by both family and institution. He heard compassion, yet he also heard a burden he was not ready to carry. When he asked whether Charles knew about the diary, she looked toward the closed door and answered, "Your father knows I wrote, but not what I feared." Elizabeth then gave one instruction. Harry must protect a single volume until the family could meet without advisors, press officers, or competing households shaping the conversation. A royal household is the staff and advisors serving a senior royal, and she feared their rival interests would silence honesty before it began. That meeting never came. Her health failed, the palace moved quickly after her death, and Harry became convinced the volume would disappear into official control. On the night before cataloging began, he used the brass key, entered the archive alone, opened a blue dispatch box, and lifted the diary. Then he froze. His own name crossed the final sealed page. He believed he was obeying Elizabeth, but William would see only secrecy and stolen authority. The Queen's request explained Harry's fear, but it could not erase what he had done, and when the two brothers were placed in the same room, years of grief, suspicion, and buried anger finally broke through royal restraint. There were no cameras, no palace secretaries, and no carefully prepared statements when William entered the court's private consultation room. Harry was already standing beside the window, his hands locked behind his back. For several seconds, neither brother spoke. Then the future king moved a chair away from the table, looked directly at the man he once trusted with his life, and demanded the one truth the courtroom had not yet uncovered. William entered determined to recover the diary intact. The judge had allowed a private consultation, a closed discussion intended to help both sides reach an agreement before sensitive evidence entered public proceedings. That mattered, because one exposed sentence could wound Elizabeth's memory, damage the monarchy, and turn a family conflict into permanent national spectacle. Harry wanted something different, legal protection for the pages she had ordered him to shield. The prince's restraint snapped first. He accused his brother of hiding behind their grandmother's memory to excuse another secret. The family had searched private rooms, questioned loyal staff, and mourned a record they believed was gone forever. Harry fired back that William always treated the institution's claim as morally superior. He said Elizabeth feared her words would be filtered through the very advisors, households, and relatives she had written about. Then William asked the question that changed the room. "Did you copy it?" Harry remained silent long enough to answer without speaking. Finally, through a recorded statement later entered into the court file, The younger son admitted that 3 pages had been photographed before the diary was secured. One concerned Diana. Another addressed Camilla's future authority. The final page contained Elizabeth's private judgment about the bond between her grandsons. William stepped closer and asked to see the page about their mother. Harry reached inside his jacket, then stopped. The prince pushed the chair back into place and said, "You did not protect her. You made yourself the gatekeeper." Harry's anger collapsed. He admitted he feared that once the diary returned, no one would let him explain why Elizabeth had chosen him. Harry lowered his hand, but the damage was complete. The photographs meant the secret could survive even if the original returned. William understood why that mattered. Copies could be leaked, edited, or used without context, leaving their grandmother unable to defend the meaning behind her words. No agreement followed. Both brothers left carrying different versions of loyalty, and neither could surrender without feeling he had betrayed the queen. The brothers left the room further apart than before, and with reconciliation suddenly impossible, the diary passed from a family wound into the hands of the one power even the crown could not privately command. The palace expected negotiation. Instead, it received an order. When the judge returned, he made clear that neither Harry's promise nor William's future crown gave either brother the right to decide the diary's fate alone. The journal would remain under court protection. Every page would be independently catalogued, and any attempt to suppress, leak, remove, or selectively quote Elizabeth's words would carry immediate legal consequences. Charles listened without moving as the ruling stripped control from both his household and his sons. The court had determined that Elizabeth's diary formed part of her private estate, meaning the personal property and records legally left after her death. It should have entered a protected royal archive, where sensitive documents are preserved under controlled access. That mattered because private ownership could let one wounded relative decide what the whole family was allowed to know. Yet the handwritten instruction complicated everything. Elizabeth had clearly intended Harry to hold the volume for a time, but no formal transfer document had been completed. Without that legal paper, his promise carried moral force, but not permanent ownership. The king pressed his thumb against his wedding ring and looked less like a monarch than a son discovering his mother had trusted him only halfway. Palace counsel urged Charles to challenge Harry aggressively. He refused. A public attack would turn the Queen's diary into the very weapon she had feared. Camilla then asked him to seek immediate access to the pages concerning her. The Queen Consort's request came through a recorded private consultation submitted to the case file. Charles answered quietly that special treatment would confirm every suspicion of palace interference. Then the independent archivist found something darker. An archivist is a specialist who protects and organizes important records, and this one discovered 7 final pages bound with black thread. Across the seal were the words, "To be read only when my family chooses truth over position." The list beneath did not name Harry alone. It named Charles, William, and Harry together. The judge placed the diary inside a transparent evidence case and locked it himself. Harry watched the key pass into the clerk's hand. In that moment, he understood that the promise he had guarded no longer belonged to him. The victory felt empty. William gained protection for the journal, but no answer from his brother. Charles prevented a palace attack, yet lost authority over his mother's voice. Harry kept his explanation, but not the power to control it. The court had prevented the diary from becoming anyone's private weapon, but its ruling could not prevent the palace from responding. And by nightfall, Harry discovered exactly what the crown was prepared to take from him. The first punishment arrived without ceremony. Harry's remaining private access to Windsor was suspended, his archive credentials were cancelled, and the brass key Elizabeth had given him was entered into court evidence. No public announcement accompanied the decision. There was only a formal envelope delivered after sunset, and the sound of Harry tearing it open while standing alone in a room filled with memories he could no longer defend. Harry read the suspension letter twice. Its language was cold, administrative, and stripped of emotion. Archive credentials are official permissions allowing someone to enter protected royal records, and losing them meant more than a cancelled pass. It cut him off from the rooms, papers, and private traces of the grandmother whose trust he claimed to have protected. The palace moved quickly, Security officers opened an internal review, a formal investigation used to determine how rules were broken and whether staff members helped. Their documented findings showed that Harry's access privileges had remained active during the confused days after the funeral. That narrow gap allowed him to enter before the archive system was reset, but investigators found no evidence that any employee knowingly assisted him. Charles signed the restriction reluctantly. The king placed the pen down and asked his private secretary to leave. A private secretary is the senior aide managing a royal's official work. Once alone, he remained seated, unable to separate the monarch's duty from a father's grief. Then, the evidence complicated the punishment. Investigators confirmed, through a sealed forensic report, that Harry had never tried to sell, publish, or distribute the diary. The original remained untouched, wrapped in the same white handkerchief Elizabeth had used at Windsor. The photographed pages sat inside an encrypted folder titled, "For the Three of Us," suggesting private reckoning rather than public revenge. Meghan found Harry sitting on the floor beside the opened envelope. She knelt beside him and listened as he admitted that preserving Elizabeth's trust had destroyed what remained of his family's trust. Harry did not blame the court or palace. For once, he named his own choice. William offered no comfort. Through a written instruction sent to both legal teams, the prince refused direct contact and ordered every message through lawyers until the review ended. Harry understood what that meant. His brother no longer trusted even a private conversation. Yet Charles could not accept silence as the final answer. He dismissed the advisors, left without ceremony, and requested one meeting with his younger son alone. Harry had lost his access, his credibility, and perhaps his brother forever. But just when the institution seemed to have spoken its final word, a father stepped outside the crown and chose to confront his son without witnesses. Charles did not summon Harry to a palace office. He chose a small sitting room at Clarence House and ordered every advisor to remain outside. On the table lay no legal file, no royal red box, and no prepared statement. There were only 2 glasses of water and a court-authorized copy of Elizabeth's final sealed page. For the first time since the case began, father and son sat together without the monarchy between them. Charles waited until the door closed before touching the document. A certified copy is an officially verified duplicate, accepted as accurate by the court, and both men were permitted to read it because Elizabeth had named them in her handwritten instruction. William had also been authorized, but the prince refused. Through a private message delivered by counsel, he said he would not face another revelation until Harry admitted the full damage caused by hiding the diary. The king asked the question he had carried since the hearing. Why had his son not come to him after Elizabeth's death? Harry answered without defiance. He feared the palace would dismiss him before he could explain the promise, then lock the diary away behind procedure. Charles lowered his eyes and admitted that fear was not entirely irrational. Royal procedure, the formal system guiding palace decisions, often turned painful conversations into controlled silence. Then Harry began reading. Elizabeth's final page did not condemn Charles, William, Camilla, or her younger grandson. Instead, the Queen warned that the monarchy could survive scandal more easily than it could survive a family, speaking only through lawyers, offices, and institutions. That mattered, because a crown built on duty still depended on trust inside the family carrying it. Harry reached the sentence written for him. Elizabeth had chosen him, not because he was the most trustworthy, but because he was most likely to resist palace pressure. Yet she added a warning. Resistance without humility could become another form of selfishness. His voice broke. He stopped and pushed the page toward his father. Charles placed one hand over the paper. He did not forgive him. He did not soften the truth. Then we begin with the truth, not absolution. Harry agreed to surrender every photograph and accept responsibility publicly. In return, the king promised the diary would not be buried before the family read the sealed pages together. It was not reconciliation, but it was movement for the first time in years. Father and son left the room without embracing, yet something fundamental had shifted. The diary was no longer a secret Harry carried alone, and the next morning, the public would discover both his betrayal and the painful reason behind it. By sunrise, the hidden diary was no longer a private royal crisis. It was the only story Britain could see. Television screens carried the courthouse image, radio presenters debated Harry's motives, and crowds gathered outside Windsor Castle, beneath a sky heavy with rain. Yet one newspaper front page captured the scandal more powerfully than any broadcast. A white diary on a black background beneath 4 words. Her words, his secret. Harry's secret had become a national argument. The court released a limited summary confirming that he removed Elizabeth's diary without formal authorization, but never sold, published, or distributed it. A court summary is an official account of a ruling that protects sensitive details while explaining the decision. That distinction mattered because it separated unlawful possession from deliberate public betrayal, leaving the country divided over whether he had acted from loyalty or control. Buckingham Palace answered through a written statement issued to broadcasters. The palace acknowledged the pain caused to the family and confirmed that an independent archive process would protect the journal. That process means trained experts, rather than one royal household, control access and preservation. Charles supported the decision because it protected his mother's words. Yet the king also knew it removed the family's power to hide from them. William watched the coverage beside Catherine. When a presenter called Harry Elizabeth's chosen protector, the prince switched off the television and said, "Protection without trust is possession." Catherine did not challenge him. She quietly reminded him that anger could become another locked door, and he understood exactly whom she meant. Then the court confirmed, through its public order, that every photographed page had been surrendered and permanently sealed. No household could leak selected fragments. No newspaper could purchase them. Charles also authorized a supervised family reading of the 7 bound pages, ensuring the Queen's warning would be heard without becoming entertainment. Outside Windsor's Henry VI gate, one moment silenced even the loudest coverage. A woman placed white flowers beside a handwritten card reading, "She held the family together. Let her last words do the same." A palace guard lowered his eyes toward it before returning to attention. By evening, the tone changed. One broadcaster framed the scandal not as theft alone, but as a collision between loyalty to a person and duty to an institution. Harry heard the words in silence. William heard them too. Neither brother could avoid the room waiting for them. The nation had seen the theft, the promise, and the punishment, but the monarchy's true test remained private. 3 men had to sit before Elizabeth's final words and decide whether truth would reunite them or merely confirm how far they had fallen. The final reading took place without cameras, uniforms, or ceremonial titles. Charles entered first. William followed, carrying no papers. Harry arrived last and placed the brass archive key at the center of the table. Between them rested Elizabeth's diary, still protected beneath clear glass. No one spoke until the independent archivist opened the sealed section and revealed the late Queen's final judgment, not on who deserved victory, but on what each man had allowed grief to make of him. Charles listened as the court's conclusion was read aloud. A legal reprimand is an official punishment placed on record, and Harry received one for removing the diary without authority. Yet the ruling also accepted that he had preserved it under a genuine instruction from Elizabeth. He surrendered the original, deleted every private copy under supervision, and accepted that no family member would control the journal again before it became another weapon. The Queen's sealed pages offered no easy comfort. She acknowledged Charles's burden, William's devotion to duty, and Harry's instinct to challenge power. Then she named the danger inside each strength: isolation for the king, rigidity for the prince, and impulsive defiance for the younger son. Her judgment mattered, because the monarchy's future depended not only on rules, but on whether those carrying them could still trust one another. Harry turned to William and apologized without defending himself. He admitted that protecting the diary had become more important than trusting his brother, and that this choice betrayed Elizabeth's warning. The prince studied the brass key, then pushed it toward the archivist. An archive charter is a formal set of rules controlling how protected records are handled, and Charles ordered a new one immediately. The final line struck hardest. Elizabeth had written that the crown could not demand loyalty from the nation, while its own family treated vulnerability as weakness and silence as discipline. William did not offer instant forgiveness, but he agreed to speak with Harry directly, without lawyers. It was not reunion. It was truth beginning where pride had failed. Harry left without the diary, the key, or the role of sole protector. What remained was accountability, and the painful lesson that love never grants ownership over another person's memory. Elizabeth's diary returned to the archive. Harry accepted the cost of hiding it. William reopened the door to direct trust, and Charles ensured that no royal secret would again belong to one wounded person alone. The Queen's final words had not destroyed the monarchy. They forced it to confront the silence that nearly did. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.